Hi, my name's Tom, and today I'm going to talk to you about polar molecules and solutions. First up, polar molecules. Polar molecules. Polar molecules are molecules which either contain polar bonds or they contain ionized groups. An example of an ionized group would be a ionized carboxyl group, and so obviously you can see it has a negative charge here because it's lost a proton, a hydrogen ion, and because of this it's become negative, and effectively it is therefore, if this group is attached to a molecule, the molecule is considered polar. Also, we can have polar bonds in molecules, and these, for example, the classic one is a hydroxyl group, and the reason why this is a polar bond is because the hydrogen and the oxygen have certain negativities like this, and so the oxygen has a higher electronegativity, and I'll write that higher and lower and hydrogen has a lower electronegativity, and because of this the oxygen is able to attract the hydrogen's electron closer to its atomic nucleus than the hydrogen is able to attract that same electron, or different electrons, to its atomic nucleus. And so overall we say that the oxygen has a slightly negative charge, and that the hydrogen has a slightly positive charge. Not huge, but just slight, like not as extreme as this, for example, this ionized group. Alright, so what does this sort of look like? Well, I'm actually going to talk about hydrogen bonds which form between polar molecules. These are weak types of bonds, but in large numbers, they're very important. Okay, and so for example, if we had water, which as you can sort of tell would be negative here, plus here, plus here, only slightly, remember, then we had, say, another water molecule, right? So this is positive, this is negative, and this is positive. If this happened, and this does happen, we see a hydrogen bonding here, which is this weak bonding, which in large numbers is important, and it's just sort of, it sort of makes sense because this is negative, this oxygen, and this hydrogen is slightly positive, and so the laws of physics are that the opposite charges will attract and the like charges will repel. So there's a slight attraction force here, okay, and these when H2O is in liquid form, these are constantly breaking and reforming. So for example, this one might change to down there, this one might go with that one, all sorts of combinations, and obviously there's only two that I've drawn here, but there'd be heaps of others around this. And so that's an example of how polar molecules can behave with hydrogen bonding. Okay, also hydrolysis and dehydration. Dehydration are two reactions which usually require enzymes. Right, we'll talk about enzymes in later videos, but they basically just catalyze reactions. That is, they are required for a reaction to take place, and basically what hydrolysis and dehydration can do is they can help break down or build up large molecules, for example proteins. Okay, and generally we see it as something like this. So as you can see, this water molecule has been separated and one hydrogen has attached itself to one random group. This is split, and that has joined onto R1, so like that and like that. Okay, hope you can see that there. Alright, now I want to just have a quick chat about solutions. Solutions, well, the basics. We have a solute which is dissolved, for example salt, in water, and the water would be the solvent. Okay, the what we're dissolving into. In this example, water. Okay, and so I'll draw an example here. We'll use this example. So we have, oops, sorry. So we have sodium chloride and H2O. The H2Os, as I sort of indicated earlier, are polar molecules. Okay, and of course the when we dissolve this is also this will ionize into sodium ions and chloride ions, and so you have actually I shouldn't have drawn the waters like that. That'll make it tricky. I'll draw them as I did before. Sorry if it's a bit messy. Okay, and so because we have, I'm not going to draw all of them, but I'll just draw the oxygen charge, and because we have sodium and chloride ions, for example here the sodium ions are going to be attracted to the oxygens, and the chloride ions, which I'll do in green, are going to be attracted to the hydrogens because the hydrogens are slightly positive. And so when they're in a solution together, that the ionizate, like they are able to break into ions because of the polarity of water. And so salt is something which is what we call hydrophilic, meaning that it can be dissolved in water, it likes water, it has an affinity for water. However, there are put an example, salt. However, there are other types of chemicals, hydrophobic, and for example oil, okay, which isn't easily mixed in with water because it's electrically neutral. Generally these are hydrocarbons. Generally they have covalent bonds and they're electrically neutral, whereas the hydrophilic are generally polar, ionized. And there's another category when we're talking about solutes, amphipathic, and these are actually really quite important because basically they're both hydrophilic and hydrophobic. So one end of the molecule and the other end of the molecule, this one is hydrophobic, for example, and this one might be hydrophilic. And these are really important for cell membranes, which we'll talk about in later videos, and they're also really important for the gastrointestinal tract, or the GI tract, okay, particularly with GI absorption. This has been part 3, polar molecules and solutions.